Welcome to Ampedcast, where we bring together the worlds of electronic dance music and storytelling. Get to know industry leaders and talent on the rise as we sit down with them to share their artist journey from behind the decks. Our community is one for artists and music lovers alike, so settle in and enjoy the experience. Welcome to Ampedcast. We're just hanging out, enjoying a great evening, and tonight we have DJ Moreno with us to share a little bit about his story, as well as give us a DJ set later on. So, DJ Moreno, it is so nice to have you here today. How are you?
I'm doing great. It is a pleasure to be here today.
Wonderful. Well, this is so much fun. Thank you for being a part of our inaugural event. And, I just want to dive in a little bit about you. Before we dive into the music side of things, we were talking earlier about running and extreme sports and, a little bit of endurance training. So tell me a little bit about your experience as an athlete and what running has done for you.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think endurance sports is definitely a big part of my life. It started in 2017 where I committed to running a mile a day. And that turned into a 5K, a 10K. Then I did my first half marathon, and then fully doing a Ironman, which I completed last year. But over the trajectory, I think the importance of health has definitely helped when it comes to the industry. I think of like performing and just like a lot of like partying, to say the most.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we all like to party, but not many of us like to run. So it's definitely something that reminds me to kind of put myself first. And then first and foremost, it's also a great way to build community. That's something that I think has blown up in the past 4 years here in Austin, Texas, where the running clubs have created these communities of dancers who most people you'll run into when you're downtown. However, when you see them at 6 a.m. running Lady Bird Lake, you know that they mean business.
This is so true. And I'm really excited that we talked about this because being an athlete and being active is a huge part of my life too. And being in the industry, it's hard to kind of find that balance sometimes because you're out late a lot of nights and then you have to get up early in the morning. So what are some of your key secrets to finding, I would say the word harmony rather than balance? How do you find harmony between being a DJ, doing the nightlife thing, and then also being active and healthy?
Also a very great question. I think it starts with first putting the importance of the artistic sort of product or any endeavor that you commit to, that you want to put out to the public. It's super important to know that to be your best self, you need to make sure that you take care of yourself. And when it comes to doing events or live shows, over the trajectory of 15 years that I've been DJing, I've learned it's best not to drink more than 2 drinks during an event, let alone, I think we were talking backstage of we could probably pregame this event. and I think it's great. However, it's the keeping up with the crowd. I think you tend to lose that sort of connection to the crowd if you have, let's say, over 5 drinks in the middle of your set. It really kind of takes away, I think, from your optimized self to be able to make the best decisions to almost exhibit your craft as an artist. So I think it's super important. I try to limit myself to 2 drinks. But in college, it was a different story. In college, just bring the bottle service to the DJ booth.
It's what you're saying is so true. And I think it's all about finding that harmony. And my experience was very similar. I got here from living in North Dakota, not experiencing much for music. And then I was able to get into the scene, then develop, Amplify EDM. And it's people were handing you drinks, right? They're just handing them to you. And I found I was losing myself a little bit. And I was okay, how do I find a balance or a harmony between who I am and being active and being present, as well as just enjoying a couple of drinks. So I think what you said is very crucial, is what is that for you? So I really appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that. And, another thing we kind of talked about that kind of goes hand in hand with this topic was traveling and how traveling inspires you. So can you share a little bit about your travel experiences and how that has helped shaped you as a creative?
Yeah, absolutely. I think traveling is something important that as an artist, you have to commit to, for the sense of, usually I like to say, like, you're a product of your environment. Well, when you start to travel, you start to kind of see how you react in different environments. And I think through the traveling is where you really get to see the sound of different cities. And then you start to really see why certain DJs play certain tracks, whether it's open format or more in kind of like the house music and EDM realm. I think it's super important. For example, EDM, I think it's now recognized worldwide as like this sound that unifies people. But back in, like, let's say early 2000s, like Ibiza was like one of the best places to go to for music. Now, why is that? I think it had to do a lot with the individuals who made the importance of production, but also bringing in artists who are have world sounds. And I think as a DJ, it's very important to bring that world sound into whichever room that you're connected to and you're playing music for those individuals, because that's how you take them on the journey. And I think it's super important to travel and pay attention, not just to, of course, the club sound, but what are people like listening to? I remember one time I was playing in Florence, Italy, and I was playing in an open format set. And out of all places in the world, somebody came out to me. They're like, "Hey, like, can I hear J's on My Feet?" And I'm like, "J's on My Feet, Miley Cyrus? What?" And I was like, "I'm in Italy right now, you know?" But like, I played it, and believe it or not, like the room went bonkers. And of course, you mix it in a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's the importance of traveling and sharing those moments with others, as well as what you can take away from the moment.
That is super powerful too, because it actually, when you just said that, it reminded me of an experience I had. I was in Istanbul, Turkey, and I was at this club, and I heard this worldly music. And at that time in my life, it was like 2012. This was a while ago, and it was before I was like really heavy into music. And I remember, though, I was teaching Zumba dance fitness at the time, and so we would play all sorts of worldly music, you know, from African beats to all sorts of like reggaeton, bachata, like all the different things. And I heard the music that I knew, and it just made me feel connected to the country. It made me feel connected to the people. And I feel like that is what is the beauty of music. And especially when you're traveling and you get to hear new sounds or hear the sounds that you're used to in a surprising new way. And it just like made me feel super excited to be in Istanbul and to be in part of a culture in music. I feel like, I don't know if you've had like those kind of experiences where it's like music really has the power to unite people wherever you're at in the world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's spot on. I think connectivity is kind of one of the reasons why we're attracted to this community, but it's also the ability to know that you don't need to know the language to be able to know that somebody's happy because they're dancing. And being able to dance with everybody. I think when we start to look at a little bit more like current events, I mean, look at COVID, right? The pandemic, like it took, we lost dancing.
We lost dancing. That's a song I think of every time.
We lost dancing.
Yes.
And I think the fact that we lost that, it's almost like there's this new era emerging from 2020 where we now seek more connectivity. We want to be in person and we want to put our phones down, which I think is also a key important part where traveling, let's say early 2000s, it wasn't as like your cell phone blocks you from experiencing what's in front of you. And I think now more and more we're starting to see that certain groups and events are starting to focus on the no phone policy. I mean, we do it for comedy already, but when it comes to like dance music, it just takes away so much from the experience, in my opinion. And I remember a time where cell phones didn't exist.
Yes, same. Are you a millennial too?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, absolutely. So it's like at the dance floor, nobody was on their cell phones.
Oh.
So I think that's important that for us to kind of bring that back, but it also allows you to connect with the individuals around you and who's in front of you and pay attention to the music a little bit more.
Yes, that is so powerful. I'm so glad you said that, because it's like, you know, it feels so good when you are at a show and you don't think about your phone and you're just enjoying the music for what it is. You're dancing, you're with your friends, you're in that moment, and nothing can take that from you, and especially some pixels on a phone. So yes, well, I'm so excited. Let's dive into a little bit about you. Thank you so much for sharing about your experiences with travel and with sports. So DJ Moreno, tell us a little bit about you and your artist journey.
Yeah, it's super important. I think it's always nice to see a little bit like behind the artist and their intention with what they do. But I think for me, it starts off, I was very lucky. My brother, along with a local DJ in Queens, Venezuelan DJ named DJ Chamo, they used to do parties. And my older brother's at 9 years older than me, and they needed strength to carry equipment. Of course, back in the day, you don't have active speakers, you don't have wireless speakers, you have these very, very heavy 1,000-watt amps, tons of speakers, and then crates for music, CDs, bookcases. So I would basically get hired. I would kind of go help with equipment. And then in these events that I was helping my brother be a part of, there was times where he wanted to enjoy the party himself. So he would tell me, all right, Josh, when this song gets to 30 seconds, and by the way, this was CDs, right? Like I'm not too old with a vinyl, but definitely when it comes to like CDs, we're talking about mixtapes, like downloading songs on LimeWire, burning the CD, putting it in your car, and then having about 32 CDs for a party. Yeah. So when it came to DJing, my brother would stop DJing to go enjoy the party, but then he'd be like, let the song get to 30 seconds, then press play. When it gets to 15 seconds, bring the crossfader to the middle. Once the song goes down to 5 seconds, switch it over completely. And that was a blend. I didn't know it was a blend. It was simply just my brother's out enjoying, and I'm going to help. And then over time, I started kind of now DJing our family events. So we did things like Halloween parties. And this was all open format. This was before I really got introduced to like the whole house music and electronic scene, where I was like DJing reggaeton, bachata, salsa, merengue. It was, you have to keep the party going. So over time, I kind of started kind of transitioning a little bit more out of like bedroom DJing and house DJing. And then I partnered up with two DJs that I kind of came up with back at home, AK Smooth and Henry S. In Queens. And these guys really opened the doors when it came to like the technology that comes behind DJing. I was very focused on burning CDs, having cue points, and then also mixing in with an iPod. So basically DJing on 3 tracks. And they introduced me to something that we now know as Serato. This was back in 2002, 2004, and that was my first sort of experience of looking at DJing like a Formula One sport. And that, I think, changed the game. That inspired me. That now like opened up new doors of like what was the capability that you can do as a DJ. And this was before stems. This was before we really had the whole concept of controllers. And you now would go to the club and see Serato everywhere. And that's how I became a Serato DJ. And I've been doing that for about like 15 years. And then we kind of fast forward to 2020, where I now make my transition into record box, which is now the way most sort of industry DJs kind of tend to follow the shows. But I think prior to 2020, it was a lot of Serato DJing, a lot of kind of vinyl controllers, and being able to just bring the sound blending experience to any event that you could possibly think of, whether it was like weddings, private events, corporate DJing, or a club, and it was like an actual, you're headlining this show or you're playing all night, right? I think there's multiple altitudes in which DJs perform at that you find your rhythm the more that you do it. But I think the key important part is to say yes, even if you haven't done it before.
Definitely. Well, it's so cool to hear your journey, because how many years total now have you been DJing?
17 now, with like the past 3 years on record box, kind of shifting off of Serato. Okay,
that is super cool, because you've seen like the kind of the gamut of like the huge flux of DJing coming into like the mainstream. So that is super cool that you share that. What has been like your biggest obstacle or I know there's a lot that you go through as a creative, but what's like a big obstacle or hurdle that you've faced in your journey that you've overcame?
Yeah, I think that's a big one. I would say I think like the fear and the stage fright. I think stage fright is something at least like the way I was comparing it a little bit earlier was like DJing is like public speaking. Some people would rather die than public speak.
I've heard that too.
So I think when it comes to DJing, it's really kind of getting past your fears of how is this crowd going to perceive my work and the performance that I'm doing, and focusing more on what's the intention. Are your intentions pure, or are your intentions kind of like you're trying to collect a check? Yeah. And I think that's what differentiates kind of like the good artists from like I would say the other guys, is the fact that you have to focus on kind of preserving your self-performance kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like your image, and you mentally prepare for it and deliver. And then there's other artists who kind of just go up, don't really pay attention to the quality of tracks of songs that they're playing, don't really pay attention to the fact that like they're redlining and it sounds like trash out there. So I think definitely working through the nerves of like being able to get on stage, perform, and keep the momentum, but then also being able to kind of trust my work and know that it's good work because it's with great intention.
Definitely. And I'd like to dive in a little deeper on that, because you talked about that nervousness that where you're up there and you're kind of more focused on you, right? You're kind of more focused on like internally, like, how am I doing? Was there a pivotal moment for you when you realized like, I've got this, and you like engage more with the audience? Is that like something that happens as an artist where you're like, you're here, right? And then all of a sudden you're like, I got this. And you look up and your audience is there and you're like more engaging with them. Is that something that happens?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it happens many times, and I think it's almost like a cycle. It reoccurs very similarly, I think, to like a muscle. When it comes to kind of repetitions, you gain confidence through repetition. And I think the more I got to DJ, for example, like a time period from like 2011 and like 2016, where I was at Fredonia State University, my college years, I remember the first time I got on campus, I linked up with like a bunch of upperclassmen, some that are in the house right now. But definitely, I told them, I was like, hey, I'm a new DJ. I'm a freshman in college and I want to DJ. And then they were like, are you good? Right? So now I had to invite them to one of my shows and kind of explain it. But being the new kid on the block, no one has a show for you because you're new. Yeah. So I think it really took gaining the confidence to be able to kind of play or set up a scenario where I was able to play music for them. And then they were like, wow, like this is actually a lot better than I thought it was going to be. And it was because of that prior experience that I had in New York City, kind of like coming in through like high school. But then when it comes to the ability to get out there, it's kind of going back to our theme here, like saying yes. Like someone hits you up saying, hey, Friday night I have this show that's going from 9 to 2. We need you to DJ. And it's like your nerves kick in. You're like, do I say yes? Do I say no? Like, how does this work? And you just say yes, and you kind of move forward. And I think through that time period, I was DJing weekly, which gives you the opportunity to know, okay, last week, these tracks didn't work. This week, we're going to substitute them with these other tracks. We're going to go with this flow at 12 o'clock. We're going to hit them with these main tracks. And that now you start to gain the confidence, but also the momentum. And I think once you have the momentum, then you start to explore it a bit more. Okay, like I'm at this live event. Now let's record it and let's put it out like a mixtape. In an age where people had CDs in their car everywhere because it's all their favorite tracks. Yeah. So it's like, how can you give everybody their favorite tracks and put it on a CD for them to take home with them? And that's when I put out my first mixtape, which was kind of how you start to build that confidence, because you start to hear what feedback people have. And of course, you're going to have people who are going to say no, who are going to say like, this is not it for me. But I think at the end of the day, you have to always start with like pure intentions and being able to be confident in putting something out there for others to give you feedback on so you can improve.
That is so true. Coming to that point, like as an artist and any creative feat, podcaster, artist, DJ, if you are open to that feedback, that is like you saying yes to growth. And that is huge for anybody in the creative industries or anywhere is, when you have that moment where you can grow and, you can filter out like good critiques from like not so great critiques, but like really focusing on like that improvement and that ability to like project to an audience, like your craft and like always honing in on that. How important is that for you as an artist to progress?
Yeah, I think you want to have kind of like your counsel. I think it's something that has really helped me has been surrounding myself with like really smart individuals who are great and first and foremost are not scared to give you feedback. And I kind of like to kind of filter in, like I have a select small group that I value their advice and value their feedback, and I put stuff out, and then I kind of go much more kind of like macro and I get a larger audience. And a lot of my friends will get a text from me with like a hidden link to YouTube or SoundCloud, and it's like a 2-hour mix. And they're like, what is this? And I'm like, I need feedback. Does it go live? Does it not go live? What do we think? Yeah. And then you start to kind of build up that audience and that crowd. And it starts with like that close circle. And then you start to expand until being able to do it on a stage or kind of worldwide once it goes on the internet.
Definitely. Well, that is super fun, and it's so true. And so my next question for you is, looking at artists that are emerging right now, like they're just getting their feet wet, what would you give as a piece of like invaluable advice that maybe you've received or just something that's on your heart to help them on their journey?
I think there's a lot. There's a lot that's always said, and kind of not to be cheesy here, but I think there's two things. One is that I'm a true believer that it takes like 10,000 hours of mastery. But then two, I think one of the rules or the key followings of life is that only the masters break the rules. And I think that's super important because you now have an era where everybody can go online, kind of turn their phone around, start DJing, and it's just like, okay, why am I not getting the followers? Why am I not getting the likes and all of this? And it's just like, you have to really ask yourself, like, everybody who you see online has put more than 10,000 hours. And I think it's really kind of short-minded to think that with 2 hours and $200 that you spend on a controller, you're going to get the same sort of, I think, eyes that the larger artists tend to get. So I think when it comes to the advice, it's really kind of putting in the time and effort, whether that's in your room or going online, but then it's also really building up. Like, okay, once I've managed to master this skill, let me break that, because that's what gets people talking.
Yes,
but true. You can only do it in a way that kind of the approach versus doing it naively, which kind of now brings this whole punk culture, which I think punk exists in rock. It exists in visual art in general. You have those who kind of follow the conventional format and those who look at the conventional format and go like, no, we're going the opposite way. And yes. It's super important.
That is so cool. And, kind of spinning off that question is like the art of technology. Like we have Twitch, we have different formats, we have podcasts, we have things where artists can put themselves out there, put in those hours in new ways. How do you think technology can help benefit an artist's career?
Yeah, I think technology has always been kind of like a key factor with DJing. I think if you look back at the start of DJing with like the hip hop culture, I think it started with kids who didn't have money and did the best that they could or more with the little bit that they had. And it's like nowadays, it's almost like flipped. It's almost like people have the money and you can buy the dopest controller that has all of the latest effects and stems and all these different kind of effects. But I think it's harder because you now have all this technology at the expense of like not committing the hours, not kind of working your way up. And I think it's super important to start with a limited amount of technology and mastering that and then building up versus having the world at the play button. And it becomes kind of daunting to look down at, almost like the way an artist looks at a white empty canvas when they don't know how to paint.
Oh, that's such crucial advice. It's like use the technology with responsibility
and intention
and intentionality. Yes. Well, this has been such a great conversation. I would like to dive into our headliner hot seat, which is a few questions we like to ask you to answer very top of mind, first thing that comes to mind. Are you ready for some headliner hot seat?
Yeah, let's go ahead. Let's do it.
All right. The first question is, what is most inspiring to you?
I think the most important thing that inspires me, it's probably gaining relative information and making it my own in a sense that provokes and inspires, which I know it's kind of like a slew of words, but I think it's important to first see kind of the music that's coming out now. Mm-hmm. I think just music alone now, it's inspiring more and more. But I think once you listen to the music, then kind of what's your takeaway, or how does that make you feel? And then how can you now kind of open that up, dismantle it a little bit, and then kind of piece it together for your audience to now hear in a different way? Because anybody can kind of go up there and press play, but I think it's more important for those individuals who are able to kind of hear something and say, okay, I like the way it sounds, but now we're going to do this to it. We're only going to play this segment, and then we're going to loop it. And then you now start to get inspiration through the new music and the new wave of things. You can't always play what's always worked. Or play old routines, because that gets old, and you're gonna hate that.
Yeah, you're gonna feel it. Well, thank you for that. Next question is, who is an artist who's inspired you on your journey?
I think when it comes to me, I listen to a lot of music, a lot of music. I definitely, from a DJing perspective, one of the first early DJs that I listened to was like Danny Tenaglia. Danny Tenaglia was kind of very dark, very drums, very New York. He's a heavy New York DJ legend. And I think it was his sound with like Oscar G, and then you have DJ Boris, Cristian Arango, Mario Ochoa, like all of these individuals kind of really kind of shape the sound that I kind of play now, which is definitely more of that like groovy city feel with like a minimal bass line, but then also a soulful either vocals or soulful kind of like hi-hats that tie it all together.
Oh, I love that. It's so cool how you talk about that. Like, you can definitely tell that like really has inspired you. And the third question is what is something you want to achieve in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, I think tying it all together, one of the things that I do want to achieve, because I am a strong advocate of health and love running, and the fact that running clubs have blown up in Austin, I really want to inspire, or I guess work together with several individuals to make an event that has a group run and then party together.
Yes.
And I would love to, of course, kind of like help contribute, but also select like what that experience looks like. Because I think it's super important, both the run, but also the experience at the end and how it kind of connects individuals. Because I think community is important. That's kind of, it brings you out of your daily norm and allows you to sort of experience, but also learn new things from others.
Oh, definitely. I love that you said community. That's a huge part of why we do what we do and why this happens. So this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you for answering those headliner hot seats. How can people connect with you online?
Yeah, check me out on YouTube, SoundCloud, Instagram, as well as X, DJ Moreno NYC. And I also have tracks on Mixcloud and SoundCloud. Those are the two. So definitely check it out. Also, go on my website, DJ Moreno Live.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And thank you all for checking out this episode of Sessions, our first Sessions. And now we're going to hear an incredible DJ set from DJ Moreno.